Chapter 28. Close. Tom sent two townsmen, Aaron and Kurt Williams, with Dylan's group. African-American, brothers, and part-time deputies, the men had grown up in that vague region that was neither mountain nor town. They and their family had always been liked by both communities. Since Aaron and Kurt's cars were stuck in the town's blockade, they took Dylan's old truck. The two would look for another vehicle on the way. Jesse and Wade drove Sky's Jeep so Jesse could practice, and Dylan and Sky went in his new truck. Dylan glanced at Sky's worried face. Jesse's close call was still on her mind. Surely, the boy's been exposed to this before, at school or in town. Sky nodded, or even my office. Yes, I know, that's what I keep telling myself. Jesse had to be. But if somehow, he wasn't. Once we brought him to your mountain, he was separated from anyone who could infect him. If he somehow hasn't been exposed, Dylan, he's at risk. Dylan gripped the steering wheel tighter. No use overthinking this. It'll just get you upset. We'll just keep an eye on him is all. We'll know soon enough. How are we going to know? It can take a year to get full symptoms. Tom told me those who are infected know they are. That's what Anna Lynn said too. She said they will get 1 or 2 mild symptoms that don't go away before it becomes a full-blown condition. Well, like I said, no sense overthinking it. Sky bit her lip and stared out the window. Hey. When Sky glanced at him, he looked down at the hand he held out to her. Sky laid her small arm on top of his larger one and clasped his hand. Odds are he'll be just fine. No worry until you know what you've got to worry about. Besides, you'll freak the kid out. You know how well he reads you. I know you're right. I'll work on it. The drive to the store seemed uneventful after the fight at Colton. They saw a few wandering sick but none that threatened them even when the group stopped at a few trucks and filled up gas cans. When the group got closer, Wade signaled them to stop at a hill overlooking the store. They studied the surroundings before driving down to the store's parking lot. It seemed Tom was right, the place looked deserted. There was only a few empty cars scattered the lot along with several items that had been dragged from the store and left in the sun. Well, Wade said to Aaron and Kurt, looks like you have your pick of vehicles. Sure does. Aaron squinted his eyes to get a better look, then pointed. What is that thing down there?
Calvin, Tony, Pete, and Frankie stood on the hill watching Sky and the others as they investigated the store below. Calvin couldn't believe their luck. On their way to Colton, they saw the very Jeep and truck they were looking for pass by on the crossroads in front of them. Fortunately for him, the road was overgrown and hid them from Sky and her people. One more minute and they would have met right at the intersection. It was perfect timing. After meeting up with Frankie, they had hit the bar he'd mentioned along with a few others, spending days in drink and relaxation. Now he and his men were all ramped up and ready for some action. Who comes waltzing by but the very people who would have the pleasure of their restlessness? Perfect timing indeed. It was time to show that woman and boy their place in this new world. Calvin exchanged delighted looks with Pete and Frankie, but Tony's eyes fixed on the boy. When Tony was like this, he reminded Calvin of a pit bull shepherd mix he'd once owned, named Rocky. That dog was always pulling at the leash, ready to mix it up with any other animal out there. But Rocky had a particular hatred for a yellow lab 2 doors down. When that lab walked anywhere within Rocky's sight or smell, Rocky tensed and stilled, eyes zeroed in on that dog and that dog alone. Fur stood all along the ridge of his back, and a low, barely perceptible growl came from his throat. If Rocky hadn't listened to Calvin so well, there would have been yellow lab dog guts all over the yard. Calvin eyed Tony. He wasn't sure the man would listen as well as the dog. Tony had tracked the boys since they settled in this spot. Calvin wasn't the only one who noticed. Frankie frowned and said, "No hurting my boy," wisely reneging on his invitation for Tony to give the boy a couple of licks. In Tony's current mood, a couple would be all it would take to doing the slight boy. Tony didn't respond. Calvin approved. Good for Frankie, sticking up for his kid. A man should always take care of his family, no matter what. He hoped the kid makes it. Calvin glanced at Jesse before giving Frankie the once-over. Taking in the father's hungover, haggard appearance, he doubted the guy had what it took to bring Tony down. Calvin would have looked forward to the match if there was more sport in it, but he could already see Frankie's crushing defeat. Poor kid. What's coming for him isn't going to be easy.